I don't know if what I did makes me the bad guy, but I do know one thing. I have never felt so humiliated in my own family. Not even when I was struggling to raise my daughter alone. Not even when I lost my wife. Not even when I buried her on a crisp October morning under a sky that refused to rain. It's been 5 years since my wife Linda passed. She was the heart of our family. The kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday, sent handwritten thank you notes, and never raised her voice unless she was cheering for our daughter, Emily, at a softball game. She was fierce, kind, and impossibly organized. She had a laugh that could lift you out of your worst mood, and a way of looking at you that made you feel seen. Emily was 17 when she lost her mom. It hit her like a freight train, but she was strong. She always has been. And I did my best. God knows I tried. I learned how to braid hair badly, how to pick the right dress for prom eventually, and how to let her cry when there was nothing I could say that would make it better. We grew close, tighter than I ever thought possible. We made our little life work. So when she met Paul in college and brought him home for Thanksgiving 2 years ago, I tried to be open-minded. He was charming, in a performative kind of way. The kind of guy who thinks he's clever because he memorized a few dad jokes and can grill a steak without burning it. I didn't love him, but I didn't hate him either. He made Emily laugh, and that was enough. At first, they got married last year in a small ceremony in Maine, Linda's favorite place. I paid for most of it. I offered, actually. It felt like something Linda would have wanted. And when Emily got pregnant a few months later, I was over the moon. I couldn't stop imagining what Linda would have said. She would have bought little onesies before the first trimester ended. She would have started knitting. Me. I did what I do best. I planned. I offered them the down payment on a house. Nothing huge, just enough to get them started. They'd been living in a cramped apartment with neighbors who played drums at all hours. I wanted them to have a place to grow, a place for that baby to run around one day. Paul hesitated at first, something about not wanting to owe me. But Emily convinced him, and we signed the papers. They moved in 2 months ago. Then came the baby shower. Emily wanted to keep it small, just family and a few close friends. We hosted it at my place. I cleaned the grill, set up tables, even borrowed Linda's old bunting from the attic. It still smelled faintly like cinnamon and fabric softener. I found one of her old recipe cards tucked inside, her famous lemon bars. I made them for the party. They were a hit. The whole day started out perfect. Emily looked radiant, glowing in that way you only read about. Guests mingled, laughed, took pictures by the diaper cake. We played silly games, passed around tiny socks, and cooed over ultrasound pictures. Then Paul opened his mouth. He was making a toast. That should have been a good thing. But 5 sentences in, he made a joke about how Emily's mom would have probably turned the nursery into a filing cabinet with how organized she was. Some people chuckled. Nervous chuckles. I froze. Then he said something else. Something about how Linda would have probably had color-coded burp cloths and an Excel spreadsheet for diaper changes. I don't remember the exact wording. I just remember the laughter. I remember Paul looking around like he was killing it, like he was some kind of stand-up comic. Emily smiled, tight-lipped. She didn't say anything. That was when I knew. That smile told me everything. She knew he was going to say it. Maybe not exactly what, but enough. And she let him. After the baby shower ended, I went through the motions. Said goodbye to guests. Packed up leftover cake. Folded up the bunting and stuffed it back into the bin where Linda's scent was starting to fade. Emily and Paul left early, claiming she was tired, which was probably true, but I suspected it was also strategic. An escape. The silence in the house afterward was loud. I stood in the kitchen, holding one of Linda's lemon bars in a napkin, staring at the fridge where her old calendar still hung. Emily had begged me to leave it up. It makes the house feel more like Mom's still here, she'd said last year. Funny how quickly that sentiment can shift. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Paul's voice again. Saw that grin. Heard the laughter. Not mean, not malicious, but indifferent. Indifferent to the woman who built this family. Indifferent to me. The next morning, I expected a call. Maybe an apology. Or at least an explanation. Instead, nothing. Not a single text. By the 3rd day, I cracked. I called Emily. She picked up quickly, which I thought was a good sign. "Hey, Dad," she said, chipper. Too chipper. "Hey, can we talk about what Paul said at the baby shower?" Silence. Then a sigh. "Dad, it was a joke. You know how Paul is." "Yes, I do. Which is why I'm surprised you let him go there." "He wasn't being serious," she said. "He was trying to be funny." Everyone laughed. Not everyone. She sighed again. "Can we not do this right now? I'm tired and hormonal, and honestly, I can't handle a guilt trip." Guilt trip. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. "Okay," I said finally. "We'll talk later." But we didn't. 2 weeks passed. I tried to move on, tried to let it go. But the thing about grief is, it's like a splinter under your skin. You might forget it's there for a bit. Then you bump it and the pain returns, sharper than before. Then I got a call from my accountant. "Hey, just confirming," he said casually. "Are we still moving forward with the disbursement for the mortgage payment next month?" The down payment I gave them, it came with a condition. I would continue to make a monthly contribution for the first year to ease their adjustment into parenthood. I had it all set up automatically. But now, "No," I said. "Actually, put a hold on that." "Everything okay?" "Not really." I didn't explain. I just hung up and stared at the wall. The lemon bar calendar. The family photo still sitting on the mantel, with Linda in the middle, smiling. Then I did something I hadn't done since she died. I sat on the living room floor and talked to her picture. "What would you have done?" I whispered. "Would you have forgiven him? Would you have told me to be the bigger person?" The answer didn't come, of course. But as I sat there, the silence finally felt like clarity. I didn't owe Paul anything. I didn't owe Emily endless patience when she couldn't find enough of her own to defend her mother. I got up, walked to the drawer where I kept the file with their mortgage documents, pulled it out, stared at the numbers, and I knew what I had to do. I was taking back the house. The morning I decided to formally reverse the support agreement on their mortgage, I felt a strange sense of stillness, not peace exactly, but a sobering clarity that felt like it had been waiting in my bones for longer than I wanted to admit, like an old companion who had finally shown their face and said, "Enough." I didn't tell Emily right away, though. Instead, I spent the next few days gathering every piece of paperwork, reviewing the contracts with the kind of scrutiny I hadn't used since I last revised Linda's medical directives, and I remembered how she made me promise back then to never let anything be left unfinished, to never let someone diminish the people we loved, to protect the legacy of our family even if it hurt. I called the bank. I called my lawyer. I sent a certified letter. There were clauses, of course, because I had been generous but not naive. A gift contingent on good faith, on mutual respect, on shared values, all of which had been outlined in the side agreement that Paul had barely skimmed and that Emily had signed after insisting it wasn't necessary, but she'd do it, if it made me feel better. It had made me feel better then. It made me feel righteous now. By the end of the week, Paul must have gotten the notice, because he texted me. A single line. "Is this your idea of parenting?" I stared at it for a long time. I could have replied with a paragraph, with a lecture, with every ache I'd swallowed since the baby shower, and every indignity they'd casually dropped at my feet since the day Linda died. But I didn't. I just turned off my phone and went outside to water the flower beds Linda had planted the spring before her diagnosis. The tulips had come up early this year. That felt like a sign. It was Emily who showed up the next day. I was in the garage, sorting through Linda's old gardening tools, wondering what I should donate and what I should keep, when I heard her voice behind me. "Dad." I turned around. She looked tired, pale. She was still wearing her hospital badge from her last shift, and her hair was in a messy bun that reminded me so much of Linda's old Saturday morning look. It knocked the air from my lungs. "Can we talk?" I nodded and motioned her inside. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured us each a cup of coffee. She wrapped her hands around the mug, like she was grounding herself. "You didn't have to do this," she said finally, voice low, cautious. "No," I said, "I didn't. But I did. It was a joke." "Emily," I said, and I could hear the break in my voice before I even felt it. "You let him make a mockery of your mother. In our home. On a day meant to celebrate your child, her grandchild. And you did nothing." Her eyes welled up then. "I didn't think it would hurt you like this." "Why wouldn't it? She gave everything for this family. She gave to you, to him, to everyone. And now she's just a punchline at a party." She tried to say something but couldn't. Instead, she looked down at her cup. "I was going to keep paying the mortgage," I said, more softly now. "Until your first anniversary. That was the plan. That was the gift. But gifts come from love. Respect. You can't separate the two." "So what now?" she asked. "We lose the house." "Not yet," I said. "You have 30 days. Then the payments resume under your name. If you can handle it, keep it. If not, sell it. It's up to you." Her lip quivered, and for a second, I thought she might shout or cry or storm out. But instead, she said the one thing I didn't expect. "I don't even know if I want to raise my child with him anymore." That sentence changed everything, because up until that moment, I thought this was just about Paul and his cruelty, and Emily's silence, and my own grief. But now, the thread started to unravel, and the story I thought I was living cracked open to reveal another story beneath. She didn't elaborate. She just stared at her coffee and shook her head slightly, like she was trying to quiet 1,000 thoughts at once. And I didn't push her. Not yet. But in that moment, I knew the baby shower speech was just a tip of something deeper and darker. For the next week, the house felt like it was holding its breath, like the air itself had grown heavy with all the unspoken things Emily hadn't told me that day. And every time I passed the nursery we'd started painting together the year before, back when the pregnancy was still new and the possibility of grandparenthood was this bright, unbroken thing, I felt the shadow of Linda in every corner, watching me navigate the wreckage of a future we had both dreamed of building, and I couldn't help but feel like I was failing her again. I waited for Emily to call again, but she didn't. A part of me thought maybe she needed time, but a bigger part worried that silence meant something worse, that Paul had gotten to her, had spun the truth so tightly she couldn't see straight anymore. So when my phone rang and her name flashed across the screen one rainy Thursday morning, my breath caught before I even answered. She didn't say hello. "Can I come over?" Her voice was flat. "Warren." I told her yes, of course, and 30 minutes later, she was at my door, soaked through despite the umbrella clutched in her hand, her mascara smudged in faint streaks like she tried to cry quietly and failed. We didn't sit at the kitchen table this time. She followed me into the den, where the old leather armchairs Linda loved were still positioned in front of the fireplace, though I hadn't lit it in years. Emily curled up into one like she was 10 again, tucking her feet under her and looking everywhere but at me. "I think he's cheating on me," she said. The words dropped into the room like stones in water, heavy, expanding. I didn't speak. Not yet. "There's this woman," she continued. "Someone he works with. Her name's Tessa. She tagged him in some Instagram post that he untagged later. I saw it by accident, but it's been eating at me." "Did you ask him?" She nodded. "He said I was being paranoid, that I was hormonal, that I should focus on the baby and let him worry about work." The way she said it, "let him worry about work," made something twist in my gut. "Then last night," she said, voice cracking, "he came home late. Said he was working late, but he smelled like cologne I don't wear." Still, I didn't speak. I wanted her to fill the silence, because I knew she needed to. She needed to hear herself say the things she had only thought in the dark. "And it's not just that," she said. "He's been different since I got pregnant. Distant. Like the idea of being a dad terrifies him, and instead of facing it, he's punishing me for being the one who actually has to do it." Finally, I spoke. "Emily, you don't have to stay." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw it. The same expression Linda wore the day she told her parents she was going to marry me instead of the accountant they preferred. A kind of defiance wrapped in fear. "I don't want to raise this baby in a house where love feels like currency," she whispered. "Then don't," I said. "Come home." She cried then, and this time I let her sob against my shoulder the way she did the night of her first heartbreak, back when all I could do was hold her and wish I could build a wall between her and every cruel thing in the world. By the time she left, the plan was set. She'd stay with me until the baby came. She'd consult a lawyer. She'd gather proof. She'd reclaim her name on the mortgage title. I would help. And when she walked out that night, a small smile on her lips and her hand resting on her belly, I realized something else. The house wasn't holding its breath anymore. It was exhaling. It was sometime in the middle of that transitional haze, with Emily now living under my roof again and the faint echoes of our old routines returning like ghosts of another life, that the full truth finally broke open. Not like a confession whispered in shame, but more like a storm pressing against the seams of a house already aching from too many winters. And when the winds came, they didn't just rattle the windows. They blew the whole thing open. Emily was folding laundry in the living room one night, something simple and domestic that shouldn't have carried the weight it did, and she paused with one of the baby onesies in her hand, staring at it like it held some coded message from the future. Then she said, without looking at me, "Do you remember when Paul first came to Thanksgiving?" I nodded. Of course I did. He'd brought a bottle of wine he clearly couldn't pronounce and complimented Linda's stuffing with such theatrical gusto that I remember thinking it had to be sarcasm. "That night," she said, still not meeting my eyes, "he told me something weird. About Mom." My stomach dropped. He said he thought she was intense, that she made him feel surveilled, like she could see right through him. I set down the crossword I hadn't been paying attention to. He said that. Yeah, and at the time I just laughed it off. But then, after she passed, he got weird about it. Like, suddenly he had all these opinions about how she ran things, how she hovered, how you were probably better off being able to breathe without her managing everything. I felt the heat rise in my chest. He said that to you? More than once. And I let him. Because I thought maybe he was just uncomfortable with grief. I thought maybe he didn't know how to talk about loss. But now I think it was something else. She looked up at me, eyes glossy. He resented her. Not because she was overbearing, but because she saw him for who he really was. And she didn't trust him. Suddenly, it all made sense. The snide toast, the veiled insults, the reason he couldn't look at the framed photo of Linda in the hallway without sneering. He had been rewriting her legacy from the moment she was no longer around to defend it. Emily was crying now softly, her shoulders shaking as she clutched a pile of tiny clothes to her chest. I think he thought if he could mock her, minimize her, make her small, then he wouldn't have to live in her shadow. But she's still here, Dad. In this house. In me. In that baby. And he hates that. I stood, walked over, and sat beside her, placing a hand on her back. She always knew how to read a room, I said, especially when the truth wasn't being spoken aloud. Emily nodded into the fabric of a swaddling blanket. I should have listened to her instincts. You were in love. You wanted to believe the best. She would have understood. And she would have. Linda never held a grudge longer than necessary. But I knew, without question, that she had seen something in Paul that worried her. And she had tried to tell me, subtly, with glances and pauses, and that way she had of communicating without saying a word. In the weeks before she died, she had once said quietly, as we watched Emily and Paul setting the table after a Sunday lunch, "He's not ready for the kind of love she gives." I had brushed it off then, but now, those words echoed louder than any of Paul's speeches ever had. It took another month for everything to truly unfold, and during that time, I began to see the situation for what it had become. Not just a disagreement, not just a petty grudge over a few careless words, but the unraveling of a foundation that had never been as stable as Emily had wanted to believe. And as I watched her regain strength, slowly and painfully, I saw something remarkable emerge from the ruins. Not just the daughter I had raised, but the woman Linda had always envisioned she would become. It began, oddly enough, with a voicemail. One morning, while I was fixing the railing on the porch, an old project Linda used to scold me for putting off. My phone buzzed with a message from Paul. He sounded agitated, tired, and more than a little afraid. "I heard you're still trying to turn Emily against me," he said, the brittle arrogance in his voice barely masking a growing panic. "You think you're the hero in this story, but you're just bitter. You always were. She'll see it eventually." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I showed it to Emily that evening, while we were sorting through more of her things from the house. She stared at the screen in silence, then handed the phone back, without a word. There was no rage in her face, no tears, just resolve. The next day, she met with a divorce attorney. It was surreal, watching my daughter sit across from a polished woman in a navy suit and calmly describe her marriage as if she were reading from someone else's diary. There were facts, timelines, text messages she had backed up, statements he had made, moments that, in isolation, might have seemed trivial, but together formed a damning pattern of emotional manipulation. She didn't cry once during that meeting, but I did. Not because of Paul, not because of the past, but because I saw Linda in her, in the way she spoke plainly, in the way she held her ground without apology, in the way she said, "This ends now." And once the papers were filed, everything moved quickly. Paul, predictably, didn't take it well. He sent more texts, more voicemails, accused her of overreacting, of letting me control her. He even showed up at my house once, banging on the door until my neighbor, a retired cop named Ray, came out and stood next to me on the porch until Paul backed off, muttering something about lawyers. He never came back after that. The baby was born 3 weeks early. A girl. We named her Margaret, after Linda's grandmother, though we all call her Maggie. The day Emily went into labor, it was just the two of us. She gripped my hand in the backseat of my car, breathing through contractions, her face pale but determined, and when she said, "I wish Mom were here," I squeezed her hand and said, "She is." I was in the room when Maggie came into the world, and I cried harder than I have since the day Linda died. Not because I was sad, but because I finally understood that life, even in its messiest, ugliest moments, always finds a way to carve beauty out of wreckage. Maggie is 6 months old now. She has Linda's eyes and her laugh, though of course that might just be my imagination. Emily is thriving, sleep-deprived, often overwhelmed, but thriving nonetheless. She found a job closer to home, picked up a hobby Linda once loved, quilting, of all things, and even started going to therapy. Paul tried to contest the divorce, but his case was flimsy, and in the end, he walked away with almost nothing. He sends the occasional child support check, each one accompanied by a note full of self-pity. Emily never reads them. We tuck them away in a drawer for Maggie to decide one day what to do with. As for me, I reopened Linda's garden, planted fresh tulips, put in a new bird bath, hung a wind chime she bought years ago but never installed. Sometimes I sit out there with Maggie in my arms, rocking slowly in the old wicker chair Linda adored, and I tell her stories. About her grandmother, about strength, about the kind of love that doesn't flinch in the face of pain. And in those moments, I know that while I lost a piece of my heart when Linda died, I also found something in its place. A deeper kind of love. The kind that demands truth. The kind that endures. Because in the end, this wasn't just about a wedding gone wrong or a baby shower turned sour. It was about remembering who we are and making sure that no one, not even family, gets to rewrite that story.